The Boston Celtics are moving on to round two after sweeping the Brooklyn Nets here at the Barclays Center. 116-112 is your final game four. Now, the Celtics will either play the Milwaukee Bucks or the Chicago Bulls. I am Josue Pavone alongside Bobby Manning. Bobby, Jayson Tatum was ejected with about 2 minutes left to go in this game. The Brooklyn Nets certainly made it interesting when they made it a one-possession game down the stretch, but it was the Celtics' defense, and it was Jaylen Brown to close the door on the Brooklyn Nets. And, man, a sweep. I know you hinted it after game one, Bobby. I know, of course, coming into this one, everyone was talking about it, but to see the Celtics do it and the way that they did, controlling this game mostly throughout the 48 minutes, I mean, they survived the big 39-point game from Kevin Durant, which I thought would come in game two. I was like, man, Durant's going to drop 40 in this one. It finally came, but the Celtics survived it, and, of course, it doesn't even matter at this point because they're on to round two.
Yeah, story of the series was the final couple minutes there without Tatum. The Nets cannot string together stops. They cut a 15-point lead down to one. That's as close as they get. They never took a lead because they couldn't sustain their defensive play. They had little spots throughout this series, but ultimately Tatum goes out, as you mentioned, following out there, and Ime wasn't fazed at all. He said, we can still target their bad defenders, Blake specifically with Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen got a few good looks at Blake for free throws, as well as getting him caught in the lane and dishing it out to the Horford three that ended up being a critical basket as well. Yeah. So the Celtics effectively, Tatum or not, ran their offense in this series, faced little resistance, and were able to pick on guys throughout. And that's ultimately what drove them to a sweep here. I didn't imagine a sweep coming in, but once you saw it, the Nets defense, worse than expected, and I was big on how bad it was coming into this. It was worse than expected. That's what led to a sweep.
You did bring it up, too. And, of course, it was Jayson Tatum with a team-high 29 points. You got 22 points from Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart with 20. I feel like when those three guys score 20-plus, they most of the time it's going to turn out to be a win for the Celtics, and that was the case here in Brooklyn. This segment is brought to you by HelloFresh. Head over to HelloFresh.com/banner16. You'll get 16 free meals, 3 special gifts, and all just because you're watching the Garden Report, guys. This is a very good deal. Again, head over to HelloFresh.com/banner16. You get those 16 free meals, 3 special gifts, and it's all because of HelloFresh. HelloFresh is America's #1 food kit. Bobby, the second thing I got to bring up to start this one off is the fact that Ime Udoka sort of saw this whole thing coming, right? He said it before the series started. It doesn't matter who we're playing against. We want to play the best team. We feel like we're the best team, the best defense in the East. So bring on the best team. And he was still saying the same words after sweeping the Brooklyn Nets. And, man, you got to look at it like this. The rest of the Eastern Conference, the teams that did miss out on playing the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, how are you feeling when you look at Ime and what he was able to do with the Celtics?
Ime alluded to what other teams did, and when you think of what other teams did, it was one team, the Bucks, who they're going to probably end up playing in round two here. Tanked from 2 to 3. Probably thought that the Celtics and Nets were at least going to make it tougher on each other, or maybe the Nets could knock off the Celtics, who I think match up pretty well with Milwaukee, and it didn't work. Celtics end up playing less games than the Bucks are going to here, even if they win in 5. And if Milwaukee, or even if it ends up being in Chicago, it'll probably be Milwaukee, they're going to go to the Garden for game 1. So They took a risk there. They said, we'll avoid the Nets, we'll get Chicago, and we'll drop to 3 because maybe we won't even see Boston in round 2. But they're going to see Boston in game 1 in Boston.
You know, heading into the second round, whether it's the Bulls or the Bucks, I know we talked about it during the Celtics postgame show that it's going to be challenging when you're playing against someone like Giannis, the champions. You know, they do have a deeper team compared to what the Celtics just saw against the Brooklyn Nets. But, like, to your point, man, I mean, or to what Ime had to say, you know, about them not avoiding the Brooklyn Nets, how much does that play a part in this head game, I guess, between the Celtics and the Bucks, if it is to be the Bucks? Like, does that factor in? Do you, if you're on the other side, are you thinking to yourself, man, that team looks even challenging than it did a couple of weeks ago? Or do you see the Bucks as going into this matchup that saying that, look, we still have the best player in this series and we still like our chances. We're still the champs.
You like the fact that Khris Middleton's out, and that ended up being a downside of the Bulls series with the Bucks there. They lost him, even though it's ended up going to be a pretty easy series win for them. So that's what everybody's going to be focused on coming in, because listen, let's be real, I'd be thinking about picking the Bucks if Middleton was healthy going into it. That's still the one thing that's really making me worried about doing that. I'm not going to make a pick yet. We'll save it for later in the week, but that's a huge loss for them. That's your primary defender on Tatum. That's your clutch time scorer and facilitator, and just one of your most versatile players on the team. Giannis is obviously the head of the snake, as Ime likes to say, but Middleton's an X factor, and they're going to be missing him big time because they don't have wing depth. They traded Dante DiVincenzo.
Yeah.
Connaughton's had a rough year after the injury. Wes Matthews is a year older. So that's a spot where they're vulnerable. And there's other areas I think the Bucks are vulnerable too. The fact that you get home court and it's a big plus on top of that. That shift that the Bucks made there was a big time risk, and it did not pay off for them. So that is something you talk about the head games. You can use as motivation if you're Ime, and he did try to use it for this Nets series as well. They can keep playing off the fact that we took the right path and we showed that we can beat a tough team in the Nets. Let's do it again against the Bucks here, because defense is obviously going to be very important in a matchup like that.
Do you take into account the season series between these two teams, if it is to be the Bucks? You know, obviously throughout the course, there was a lot going on both sides.
Played them well.
They did play them well, but I feel like there's a lot going on both sides. The Celtics are clearly a different team now, you know, with Robert back and, you know, back into the fold. He looks like he's got a couple of games under his belt now, so he looks much better. Or you feel better about him going into this series, that he has those couple of games that he, you know, because he was out for so long. Does that hold weight, the season series, and what we've seen between these two teams so far?
No, I think the Bucks have gotten better, but again, now Middleton's out. Brooks back. I think that's an important addition for them because the Serge Ibaka thing didn't really work. I don't put too much weight on it. The Celtics are playing at a much higher level than I think they were on Christmas and then some of those other early matchups there. They did play the Bucks well on Christmas too, but they blew that big lead. And then they ended up stealing a couple from them early in the year as well. I think they ended up splitting the series 2-2 by the end of it. But I put that away at this point. Middleton being out's huge. Rob, we still don't know. He didn't look great tonight. No. He gets a week off here, which is important. But he's going to have to get his legs under him some more, look like Rob. He did in the first game. He didn't look like Rob at all in this one.
But I feel like you should be somewhat happier, right? Because at least he had a couple of games under his belt. Because I think Rob, fresh out of an injury, going into the best-of-7 series, is going to take a little bit for him to ramp up. Now you got that out of the way.
Yeah, and you get some scrimmage time this week. I'm sure they'll be able to go hard in practice, given that we might be 5-6 days from game one of this next series. Right. So they're going to get back to Boston. They're going to ramp everything up. And they got to, because Rob's going to be front and center in that Giannis matchup. Horford, he'll need the rest because he's going to be the point man on Giannis. They got good personnel to line up with this team. You like Smart on Holiday. You like Tatum on Giannis at times, and maybe even a perimeter guy to just take out entirely like Bobby Portis. So your defense matches up well again going into this series, and that's the calling card for Boston at this point. Mentioned the offense at the beginning. Defense was ultimately what really drove them through this series, wasn't it?
It was, but with this type of team though, because we knew depth wasn't going to be an issue for the Celtics going up against the Brooklyn Nets. I don't know if we can say the same thing about the Bucks, you know, especially if these guys get hot, you know, these shooters get going.
Middleton, it's another story though. Everything kind of.
Would you miss Grayson Allen making 6 3-pointers the other night? I mean, look, I'm not saying that's going to happen all the time, but
they have a lot of shooting.
If Middleton was completely out of it, you know, I mean, I don't know. They have other shooters, exactly, is what I'm trying to say.
Yep, yeah, they do. All those guys can hit threes. Giannis is going to find them. Yeah. And you know that crowd's going to go crazy in Milwaukee. Listen, we watched a dead Nets crowd here tonight. This is an easy road trip for the Celtics for many reasons. It's not the same in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and well, there's a lot of green uniforms in here. That's true. We heard let's go Celtics. We heard the Tatum MVP. Man, we got a little homesick, I guess. It felt like we were at the Garden in some of these games, some of the quarters.
Yep, definitely. I'm not sad to leave Brooklyn. I am. Yeah.
I think you're happy. We don't have to come back. I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of had an idea that wasn't going to be the case, especially after the Celtics went up 3-0, but that's no longer on our minds. The Celtics have completed the task here in Brooklyn. They complete the sweep 4-0 against the Brooklyn Nets. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, they're gone fishing, Bobby. It's done for them.
Talk about them in
summertime. Stay tuned. Our next video, we're going to break down Brooklyn. Maybe talk about their off-season woes, or maybe we'll just talk about their post-game comments because they were pretty interesting. So stay tuned for that in our next segment. That's going to do it for us here at the Barclay. He is Bobby Manning. I am Josue Pavone. We'll see you in the next video. Stay tuned.